Greetings, friends. It is I, Reformed Stoic. I hath returned. I am unfazed by the discussions happening in the comment section of the last video. So I should have known that atheists were going to show up and do their thing. And you know what? On some level I did, and I got no problem with it at all. So as you can see, I think I have my laptop here. I just have a few notes here that I'm going to read to start off. But before that, I just wanted to clarify that in my last video, I had mentioned that my beliefs were one thing, and that the information that I was going to present in that video was another thing. I mentioned something in passing that seems to be very important to the majority of the atheists discussing in the comment section. I mentioned that I personally don't believe in macroevolution. I believe I just said Darwinism or evolution, but it should be known by all Christians that there's a difference between microevolution and macroevolution. Macroevolution is the changing of one species into another, whereas microevolution is just small adaptations within a species. It's safe to say that microevolution has been demonstrated. There are some examples of macroevolution being demonstrated as well, and we're going to get into that. So let's just go ahead and wrap that up by saying I did a very, you could say, noble, humble thing by saying there's what I believe, and then here's the argument that I'm presenting to you. A lot of people attacked that passing mention of my beliefs. Well, we're going to get into why I believe what I believe in this video, and then maybe you'll understand why I don't really focus so much on my beliefs when I'm debating your beliefs, because I think it's safe to say that I have a pretty strong understanding of what your beliefs are. Okay, moving forward. We got the main humanoid fossils and transitional fossils. So there are four main humanoid fossils. We have Sahelanthropus tchadensis. Very difficult to pronounce. Very difficult to pronounce. About 7 million years old. Earliest potential hominin, Chad. It just says Chad. Maybe that's because it's tchadensis. So it was a Chad. The first ever living hominid was a Chad. Okay. Earliest potential hominin, Chad. Moving on. Ape-like skull, bipedal traits. Bipedal meaning that it walks on two legs rather than all fours. So we're going to go over the transitionary fossils after we go over the four main ones. Then we have Australopithecus afarensis. So this is believed to be 3.9 to 2.9 million years old. You know, just somewhere in the ballpark of that million-year range. Bipedal, ape-sized brain. And then it gives an example of Lucy in Ethiopia, mixed ape human traits, human-like pelvis, and ape-like skull. Then we have Homo erectus. Anywhere from 2 million years to 100,000 years ago. Anywhere from 2 million to 100,000 years. That is a very, very long period of time. But okay, moving on. Human-like body with a larger brain, advanced tools, global dispersal, so they're in Africa, Asia, Europe. And then we have Homo neanderthalensis, which would be the Neanderthals. Description: robust build, large brain, distinct tools, interbred with Homo sapiens. There's 1 to 2% of their DNA in non-Africans. So I believe that's suggesting that European people have more of the Neanderthal DNA. Interesting. I've heard this before. Sister species, subspecies to modern humans. So then we have some examples of transitional fossils. So the first one was the Sahelanthropus tchadensis, whatever. And the first fossil transitioning to Australopithecus would be Orrorin tugenensis. Femur suggests bipedalism, ape-like arms. Then we have Ardipithecus ramidus. So the first one was 6 million years ago in Kenya. And this one's 4.4 million years old in Ethiopia. Partial skeleton, bipedal pelvis, grasping feet, smaller canines, bridges ape-like, Sahelanthropus to a afarensis. Man, these are very difficult to pronounce. This is really taking me off guard. So then there's one more example. The Australopithecus ennemensis. 4.2 to 3.9 million years old, Kenya, Ethiopia. Bipedal, tibia femur. The bipedal appearing tibia / femur, ape-like skull, closer to a afarensis, bipedalism. Okay, and so each one of these 4 main fossils, because I think I'm ready to move on, has a few examples of transitionary fossils. So in conclusion, in total, we have the 4 main stages with total of 8 transitionary fossils. 12 altogether for humans. And I'm sure that there are more examples of transitional fossils. Okay, so that was a little bit difficult to get through. Maybe I'll edit that up a little bit. So then we have, just for anybody who's interested in dating, people are familiar with carbon dating. But carbon dating is only good for about 50,000 years. It's not able to detect whether or not something is older than 50,000 years old. So there's potassium argon dating. Then there's electron spin resonance, measures trapped electrons in tooth enamel or shells accumulated from natural radiation to estimate time since fossil formation. This is supposed to be good for 50,000 to 2 million years. It's supposed to be able to date something up to 2 million years old. So then you have stratigraphy, relative dating. Uses geological layers and their sequence to estimate fossil age, often paired with radiometric methods. Its age range is for any age, but it's less precise without absolute dating. Then you have paleomagnetic dating. It uses Earth's magnetic field reversals, recorded in rocks, to date fossil-bearing sediments, cross-referenced with known reversal timelines. The range is millions of years. So then the last thing I have in my notes is that macroevolution, being a changing into a different species, was supposedly observed in the chichlid fish and then also in the apple maggot flies. Okay, so I'm going to set this to the side for a minute because I have one more note that I'm going to bring up later. So, I had a long discussion with Grok last night, and I am not taking any shortcuts here. I am not trying to be in denial or hide anything from myself. I went to videos where people in the comments were making long lists of arguments against macroevolution, and I copy-pasted their comment, and I put it in Grok. And I gotta tell you, man, Grok had an answer for everything. I'm not saying, obviously, you'll see where this video is going. I'm not saying, obviously, that there are no solid points against macroevolution. But a lot of Christians, I would say, are somewhat desperate. And they're clinging on to old arguments that have not withstood the test of time. Now, some of Grok's responses I would have some retorts to in terms of irreducible complexity. Perhaps science has come up with their own explanation to at least attack this idea that there is irreducible complexity, meaning that certain sets of genes and certain organisms like the eyeball are not able to function at all if there are any missing or incomplete parts, which does not allow this slow process. Science has come up with some responses, but I wouldn't say that that takes irreducible complexity off of the table. So the point was to show you that I'm not hiding from anything in evolution. A few people have tried to accuse me, like, oh, you don't understand evolution, take a biology class. I've taken plenty of biology classes. Evolution is really not that complex. I've read through Grudem's entire systematic theology, which deals with evolution, and it just says that, you know, because it's a Baptist theology, as a Baptist, you have a choice to believe in, you know, I can't remember the exact term, but basically in evolution. Like, that evolution happened, macroevolution happened, and God guided the process. Or you don't have to. You can believe in creationism. Grudem's systematic theology said that there's actually not really that much of a reason to believe in macroevolution. I'm not asserting their arguments to be correct. I'm just saying that I read Grudem's systematic theology. I think it's been like 3 years now, and it did take a stance against evolution. It says you can believe it if you want, but that there's not a reason to. However, the book had the same point of view with old Earth versus young Earth, and it took the opposite position. It said that science is actually giving some conclusive evidence of a old Earth. So just some food for thought. Take it up with Grudem. It's in there. Grudem takes the side against evolution. Okay. So at this stage of the video, I will give some of my thoughts, assuming that all of this evidence that science and academia have come up with is legitimate, playing their game on their terms, you could say. It starts with this. Macroevolution is a scientific model, and there is some evidence that works within this scientific model. As these scientific atheists will all remind me in the comments, science isn't about proof. It doesn't matter if it's not proven to be true. Well, that's the rhetoric of your belief, whereas an example for, like, you know, Jay Dyer using the transcendental argument, I don't tend to appeal to this argument. It's the idea that, you know, logic, rationality, reason, objective truth, it all comes from the mind of God, and that there can be no objective truth without the existence of God. Okay? So these are kind of like some gotchas. Like Jay Dyer says, gotcha, you can't have reason with God. And then the atheists say, gotcha, we don't have to prove it. And it's like, I'm trying to compromise here and just say, you know, that's your lingo and your rhetoric. I don't subscribe to it. Just like you don't subscribe to Jay Dyer and his transcendental argument. One of the things that I saw Grok saying, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to support this scientific model of macroevolution, making it the best information that we have. So I would retort with that there is evidence that works with this scientific model. There is evidence that works with prior scientific models and competing scientific models. The rhetoric that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence is exactly that. It is just rhetoric. What constitutes something? What constitutes an overwhelming amount of evidence? That is arbitrary. That is up to somebody's opinion. Considering the extension of this amount of time, you know, they're saying millions of years, millions of the first bipedal showing thing that can be considered a hominin. This goes back 7 million years ago, and then the next one's like 4.5 million years. It's like, and then they're saying like this could be anywhere from 100,000 years old to 2 million years old. Well, I can make arguments that you don't have an overwhelming amount of evidence. You have 12 pieces of evidence that I've presented here in terms of humanity. Because what I wanted to say about the tchid, whatever, the tchid fish, and then the apple fruit flies, these creatures, well, we're talking insects and fish, they could work in a manner that cannot be compared to humanity. And when we're talking about, creationism, and people didn't really seem to process a lot of the information I said in my last video regarding my spiritual beliefs. I said that I don't take a hard Christian stance anymore, and I talked a little bit about Jacob Burma versus Meister Eckhart. Well, just so you know, these are people that are viewed as heretics in the church, okay? So I'm kind of like in my own spiritual way right now, but somebody keeps asking me if I'm a Christian. I believe that Christ was God. I believe that Christ is King. I follow Jesus Christ. You guys don't care to hear me go on and on about that. I can tell from the last video, I was like, oh, did you know that Rene Guénon was initiated into Martinism? Yeah, no, they didn't care about any of those details. These atheists mean business. So let's go ahead and get down to it. I think even if you've observed these new species being created from, in the example of the fruit flies and the tchid fish, that cannot be applied to human beings or other species. So, to make it clear, what I'm looking for is evidence of macroevolution in humans. And you should have no problem with that, because I have put forth a pretty impressive smorgasbord of evidence of macroevolution in hominids. Hominids. So, why don't I believe? Well, just to make it clear, there's a scientific model, and there's evidence that supports the scientific model, as there is evidence that supports other scientific models. And that is exactly what science claims. And that's why it is a theory, because it is a scientific model which the establishment has found a decent amount of evidence for. When they say an overwhelming amount of evidence, that is rhetoric, what you consider overwhelming, and you're desperate to shove this view down everybody's throat, and I, on the other hand, am not. So my expectation of an overwhelming amount of evidence, especially considering millions of years have gone by, would be quite a bit more. I think that's a fair assessment. So on top of that, let's say that all of these systems of dating are accurate, and we really have, Lucy and these fancy named fossils, and you got one, it's got the bipedal features, and then the ape-sized skull, and then as time goes on, the head gets smaller, and it continues the bipedal features. Well, this is where I would start to explain the unknown ancient world that these people are attempting to explain by digging up these fossils and looking at them under a microscope and dipping them in chemicals and putting them in a machine and doing whatever with these bones. They get a bone. Some of these were admitted to have been partial skeletons. They get these bones. There's no writing about what these are. Nobody lived supposedly way back when these things existed. Okay, our human writing, our documentation of human life extends maybe this is off the top of my head. I think I've heard maybe 45,000 years. But again, that's where you start taking strange hieroglyphs, and then they're applying carbon dating. The writing extends back maybe 6,000, 10,000 years, very in line with a creationist kind of a worldview. So we have these scientific atheists who their entire worldview is based off of this story painted by looking at bones under a microscope and putting it in the machines. And I know the atheists are just getting so angry when I say that. You don't understand the machines. It's not just a microscope. It's like whatever they do. They dig up the bones. They do whatever they do. They do the different kinds of dating that I talked about. The potassium argon dating, the electron spin resonance, whatever. They put it through all their little machines, and then they get data about these bones, and then they come up with a story. And it's interesting how space is very similar. I'm kind of getting into it with some people about space, and yes, I've revealed it, that, there's a very public tie between Stanley Kubrick and NASA, and it seems like Kubrick was recruited because he was making 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I'll just start getting down to it, guys. Like, a lot of people don't believe in the moon landing. My sister is a normie who believes in evolution very strongly, and she believes in outer space. But she told me in that same car ride where, they're like, when you think about how it was billions of years, I brought it up in the last video. She told me she doesn't believe in the moon landing. I've seen a video of an engineer who's like, you're an idiot if you believe in flat Earth and you don't believe in space. But I also don't believe in the moon landing. It has become very, very common for people to deny the moon landing. Just look at it. Look at the footage. It doesn't look real at all. And, we can't go back to space because we lost the technology. And you need to keep in mind the difference between lower Earth orbit and beyond lower Earth orbit, okay? Because there's a rocket launch in my hometown of Kodiak, Alaska. I had recently been there for 3 years, sent there during the craziness of the pandemic. And I did some research on the rocket launch there, and then they said that everything that they do is in lower Earth orbit. So, according to particular views that we're not going to dive deep into, the Van Allen belt that separates outer space from lower Earth orbit is a kind of dome that nobody has ever passed or ever will pass, and it is completely impenetrable. There's something called Operation Fishbowl, I believe, where around World War II or shortly after, they were firing weapons into the dome, trying to destroy it. And, this is conspiracy theory territory. But the point I'm getting to is it's interesting how, somebody said in the comments, we've observed looking into space with a telescope. You're looking in outer space with a telescope, and you're coming up with these phenomenal stories about how the universe is infinite, and there's all these spontaneously arising galaxies. And I'm sure you're seeing this with a telescope, but the thing is, it's like you don't really know what these things are. Just like the fossils that you're looking through the microscope and brushing it, and dipping it in the chemicals and putting it all in the machines. It's interesting, and I understand why people are doing it. But then you start to look at the narrative that's being developed both by space and the ancient, far pre-civilizational, ancient, millions and millions and billions and billions of years ago world. That really, none of us have ever been there. There's no writing from these times. There's no time machine to go back to these times. I would just lightly consider, how can you know for sure that these forms of dating are correct? The only way that you could verify it is to have somebody 5 million years ago confirm that this is actually 5 million years old. It's like, wow, this kind of radio dating works because I was there 5 million years ago, and, here's my picture with it, and yeah, that's all nonsensical. I mean, these people are digging 7 million years into the past and coming up with these stories, and then they're looking into space and coming up with these stories. And it's funny how people in the comments, it's all dinosaurs and it's all space. It's like, oh, well, there's an infinite galaxy and we're only less than 1% of the galaxy, and there has to be more life and there has to be more complexity, and that all exists from chaos. And it's like, but why do you think you know this stuff? You've never been to outer space. You don't know anybody who's ever been to outer space, and nobody you know knows anybody that's been to outer space. Somebody brought up something about Antarctica. It's like, well, that's like saying Antarctica doesn't exist because you haven't been there. It's like, well, Antarctica's a bit mysterious, but I do believe that it exists. In fact, there's a recent story about some TikToker landing there on his private plane and getting in a lot of trouble. So it's not the same, is the thing. And this is where we just start kind of getting right down to it, guys. The bottom line in terms of macroevolution is that I already said in the last video that even if it was true, that doesn't negate anything about the intelligent design. In fact, this kind of material that everything is made of that becomes other species over the course of millions of years, I mean, that's fascinating, you know, and that sounds like the most advanced design ever. And when you look at DNA, it's like a computer program. It looks like something that was designed. So, like I said, appealing to real theology. I'm not especially impressed with Baptist theology anymore, but, you know, even Catholicism, the Pope has said that there's nothing wrong with believing in evolution, and that basically you can believe whatever you want about the Old Testament. I like to joke and laugh that even though I admit that I've kind of left the church into this more perennialist, spiritual, mystic view, going by Vatican II, I'm still allowed to be a Catholic. And that's the kind of stuff that makes sedevacantists and traditional Catholics like rage and seethe. And I totally get it, because I used to kind of be in their ballpark. I'm being respectful by saying that I'm not still a Catholic. I consider going back to the Catholic Church, but I know the atheists don't care about that. All business. All business. What you have with macroevolution is a very impressive scientific model. It has the full weight of the establishment behind it. You have infinite money, and you are dead set on keeping this scientific model alive. I believe that this scientific model has been on the ropes a couple of times throughout history, but you keep dumping money into it, and you have the agenda of keeping it alive. Any of the flaws are cast to the side and glossed over with rhetoric, and all of the small victories are over-exaggerated. You call the evidence that you have overwhelming. I disagree. And others would disagree as well. You know, you have a couple of old fossils that you claim with your methods are these millions and millions and millions of years old. So we're looking at this strange alien time that I would go as far as to say that we don't know anything about it. Like, oh, we have science, and this is the arrogance of modern science. You were not there. You have a bone. You do a bunch of weird stuff with this bone, look at them under a microscope, and, you know, brush it, and do your chemical dips, and put it in your machines, and then you come up with a fanatical story about what it means. The data is just data. Anytime there's data, a human being who's a part of a think tank, who's paid by the establishment, who is a part of a scientism cult, they interpret the data. Data is just data. This data is being interpreted by establishment propped up individuals. So at some point in this video, I wanted to talk about what happens when the establishment loses. And I'm going to channel somebody from my past, a teacher of mine. I've already channeled him a little bit in the last video. I'm going to throw him a bone. Southern Israelite. I ultimately left his cult. But when it comes to exposing the establishment and an anti-establishment worldview, I believe a lot of his research is still very relevant. He talked about a back and forth debate between a few different theologians and academia over what's called the documentary hypothesis. You would need to dig up his long video about this if you were interested in it. But there was a back and forth. You know, academia came up with their response, and then one of them was like Archibald Archer or something, Archibald Archer, whatever. He came up with his response, and they went back and forth. Okay, I do have some of this documented, but this is just off the top of my head. This back and forth goes all the way back to the Göttingen University, where the documentary hypothesis originated, which interestingly enough has ties to Illuminist idealism, the Bavarian Illuminati, and Jesuitism. And we're going to get more into that in a different note later. But this back and forth continued from that moment for a very long time, leading up till about the 1940s, when the ball was left in the court of academia, and it was eventually just ignored. And eventually the universities just kept teaching their spiel about the documentary hypothesis, even though it had been refuted by theologians. So this is one example, and I understand that I haven't done the best job of documenting it. But if you're interested, the information is out there. You can go look up Southern Israelite and tell him that I sent you. I'm sure if he's actually interested in teaching people these things still, he would be more than happy to put you onto that playlist of videos. So this is an example of a debate between the authorities in academia and these kind of lone wolf theologians. And when the theologians prove to be too much, the debate eventually just stops, and academia considers itself an authority on the subject, even though they had no answer for this lone wolf theologian, and they continue to teach what has ultimately been refuted by theology. So now here's a better example. There was a debate between B.F. Skinner and Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky championing his peculiar rationalist view versus B.F. Skinner's behaviorism. And B.F. Skinner at the time, with his behaviorism, was being championed by the establishment. He was their guy. Because this behaviorist view is right in line with evolution, and evolution is right in line with the establishment, as I've already hinted at. Well, B.F. Skinner and Noam Chomsky had one hell of a debate, and Noam Chomsky smashed him. Noam Chomsky is absolutely brilliant, as I've already noted in prior videos. Like, he is an absolute force. Again, something that Southern Israelite pointed out is, you ever notice how there's not a lot of universities that want to have Noam Chomsky speak there? You notice how, like, Noam Chomsky's not really invited on the news that often? They don't like him. And he is a clean, squeaky guy. You can't call him a white supremacist. He's Jewish. You can't throw Noam Chomsky in the trash. He's legit. His view of rationalism implies this kind of innate knowledge, not a tabula rasa, that we are born with this kind of ingrained program. And again, this goes back to the philosophy of cognitive science class that I took. At the very end of the class, we wrote an in-class essay where we could either defend Noam Chomsky's rationalism or the teacher's eliminative materialism. And I defended Noam Chomsky because Noam Chomsky's view kind of dips its toes into a world that maybe implies a kind of intelligent design. So, what happened? What happened when Noam Chomsky got his shit... when B.F. Skinner got his shit packed in by Noam Chomsky? Some government official writes up an article. Oh, well, you know, B.F. Skinner won the debate, and this is why, and that's that. And, of course, this government official, he's not the brains of the operation. He's not the brilliant philosopher or behaviorist, psychologist. I believe he was like a behavioral psychologist, scientist. This guy is just some establishment pawn. You know, this is just some government official. Well, we just wanted to officially declare that B.F. Skinner won the debate because. But you look at the debate, and Noam Chomsky packed his shit in. This is another example of the establishment losing and then just saying, no, we didn't lose. And then they just ignore it. It's very in line with how narcissists act when they lose. Or I think somebody said something about if you beat somebody in a debate, they'll come back the next day and they'll act like they have no memory of it. I can't remember who said that. Anyway, yeah. So this guy who works for the government and declared that B.F. Skinner won. Well, he's not on the level of B.F. Skinner. He's not on the level of Noam Chomsky. He can't debate either of these guys. He's some joke. He's some muppet. Like who is he? The debate happened, and everybody can make up their mind for themselves who won the debate. And you should look into that debate because Noam Chomsky destroyed B.F. Skinner. And of course, the establishment kind of started to move on from B.F. Skinner's model after that. Oh, well, science adapts. And science adapts because B.F. Skinner's limping away with his tail between his legs after Noam Chomsky raw-dogged him. So then they just move right on to the next thing. And that's part of what I'm saying about evolution is it's been on the ropes a couple of different times. But things just keep moving forward. So, unfortunately, this is another long video. But then I wanted to talk about Teilhard de Chardin in the Piltdown Man. And there was another figure involved in this who his name escapes me. But these are all things that you can look into for yourself. So I'm not going to be long-winded on this. The Piltdown Man was presented at a high level as a proof of a kind of ape man. This was supposed to be an early proof of a transition between ape and man. Well, it was revealed to be a hoax. And it was being embraced by Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit. Jesuits have a very long history in involvement with science at an establishment level. So this was kind of the establishment getting caught with his pants down, trying to fabricate evidence. And, of course, when I brought this up to Grok's response was that, well, we have much better ways of revealing hoaxes now, of proving frauds, of proving temperament. I would retort with, we, because there is no we, they tried to kill us in the early 2020s, you know what I'm talking about. First of all, there's no we. They have much better methods of creating frauds and falsifying evidence now. And there's no reason to think that that's not the case. So, look, guys, I'm just going to be clear here. The back and forth, the discussions, you guys did fine. I respect your view. Hopefully on some level you can respect mine. I'm not the only one who thinks these things. I'll be happy to go back and forth with some people in the comment section here, but eventually you're going to move on with your life. Your beliefs aren't going to change. I'm going to move on with my life. My beliefs aren't going to change. Here's the bottom line. Why don't I believe in macroevolution? Why don't I believe in outer space? When it comes to believing in outer space, I'm not going full like flat earth, there's no space, but there might as well not be, you know, in my view. because all of these fantastical claims about the infinite universe, when I want to learn about things that happened, I read them in books written by people who were there. In my opinion, the best way to know about history is to read documented history. Words. You came to your belief of how we came to be, the great philosophical questions. Your worldview comes from taking a rock and putting it under a microscope, baby. Taking a bone and putting it in a machine, putting it in a microwave. And then you look at the data about the bone and let me tell you what happened 10 million years ago. And I'm just going to be blunt with you. I don't have to believe it. We have the freedom of religion. We have the freedom of speech. And my spiritual belief is that I don't believe in macroevolution. And I don't have to. And as we've seen in the examples I've put forward of the documentary hypothesis, there's a back and forth. The establishment entertains the brilliant theologians for a while, but eventually they're like, you know what? I'm not going to respond. And we're going to continue our classes as scheduled, even though all of the homework we're assigning has been refuted. We're not going to play this game anymore. And every now and then somebody like Noam Chomsky steps up to the table and takes, their little behaviorist worldview they're trying to show at the time and picks it up over his head and slams it on its ass. And then some idiot who works a government job is like, oh, well, clearly Noam Chomsky lost the debate because I don't really know philosophy, but he just lost, okay? Behaviorism is real. This is why you act the way you do. Not because you have some sort of a DNA program and innate ideas that were pre-existing. Like, ooh, that's kind of creepy, and that maybe suggests something that we're really uncomfortable with. So he lost because we said he lost. And then you have the Piltdown Man hoax. And this is a long time ago, and Stoic, we've come up with such better evidence now, and we don't have to worry about hoaxes anymore because we have the greatest methods we've ever had of debunking hoaxes. Well, perhaps you have the greatest methods that you've ever had of creating hoaxes. Who's to say that you're not manipulating the results in these machines that are, giving you your electron spin resonance and your potassium argon dating and your uranium dating? And who's to say that the results coming from this type of dating really proves that something's 7 million years old? Like, how could that be verified? You have this entire theoretical history that took place 10 million years ago or more. The only way you ever got there is about rocks under a microscope, bones in a microwave, all of your methods that don't involve like actual documented history. Same thing with outer space. You got your really powerful telescopes and you're looking out there into whatever all that crap is out there, and you're telling me like, oh, well actually, there's no reason to believe in the Bible. Because that's what it all comes down to. And yeah, there's some Christians who have, kind of compromised with evolution, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people working overtime to try to prop up eternally, with all the money in the world, this macroevolution model, who are not willing to compromise with Christianity, or any world religion for that matter. And I just wanted to point out one of the comments on the last video. It was a very short comment that you are weaponizing your ignorance. So, ignorance, just saying that I don't know, that I'm stupid, but it's weaponized. I almost take that as a compliment. It's like, wow, you see it as threatening. But what is it that you see as threatening? Me believing in God? Me believing that because they got really in their feelings about evolution, and all these people attacked me about evolution. That video was not about evolution. I mentioned in passing that I don't believe in macroevolution. But if it was ultimately proven beyond the shadow of a doubt to be true, there's still room for God, there's still room for intelligent design. I believe that this ability to adapt and survive reeks of an intelligent design. But I still don't buy it. I still don't buy it. You have a scientific model, and you have evidence that works and supports your scientific model. That's all fine. There's other scientific models that have other evidence that supports them. But we have an overwhelming amount of evidence. Well, that's rhetoric. That's your opinion. I don't find it overwhelming. I find it underwhelming. And who's to say that other evidence hasn't been suppressed? We wouldn't know. Somebody's like, oh, wow, I found something fascinating that suggests that, all of this research is obsolete. Well, who's to say those people aren't getting killed or suppressed? This ultimately boils down to my anti-establishment view, my friends. I've seen the bottom line of outer space. I've seen the bottom line of macroevolution. And, I think people have gotten carried away. I'm the descendant of John Adams. You have to understand. My ancestor told the government to go fuck itself, and when they tried to do something about it, they fucking killed him. That's where I come from, guys. And John Adams didn't concern himself with dinosaurs or outer space, but he did talk about his favorite theologians, and a lot of them were members of the Royal Society. And they were involved in what's called... Jay Dyer and Trent Horn had a debate on this. It's this kind of like science that tries to prove God. I can't remember the specific term for it, but it was what the Royal Society was involved in the time. And science, early science, was being used to try to help us learn about God and try to help show and prove God. Darwin considered the existence of God. But of course, the rhetoric of modern science is like, oh, well, it's not about Darwin. We continued his work. Yeah, well, you cherry-picked his work because Darwin said something about the human races that I know that this regime does not like. And what happens when this regime doesn't like something? They throw it in the garbage. They like macroevolution, so they keep that, but they don't like what Darwin said about race. So they cherry-picked Darwin, and it shows that the establishment has feelings and opinions, and it's kind of like this big floating head behind the curtain, or it's a big floating head, and then there's a man behind the curtain. The establishment worldview is the big floating head that's terrifying, and we have an overwhelming amount of evidence. And then you look behind the curtain, and it's like, oh, we had to throw away a lot of what Darwin said because it was racist. Well, in the time of cancel culture, aren't people just completely tarred, feathered, and crucified when they say anything inappropriate or racist? Shouldn't everything Darwin ever taught just be thrown in the trash because he was racist? Isn't that how it works? Apparently not. That's not how the cultural Marxist occupied West works. They keep what they like and they throw in the trash what they don't like. So they chopped Darwin's work in half and they kept the part that they can try to use to get rid of God. Well, there's very clearly an agenda. And, we sit in your movie theater and you show us the overwhelming evidence, and a lot of people are wowed and dazzled to the point where a lot of theologians are like, hey, you know what? God can work with evolution. Hey. But I'm to the point where it's like, hey, you know what? I'm not convinced. And you're like, oh, well, you're an idiot and you're ignorant. It's like, okay, you're allowed to insult me. That's your freedom of speech. I'm allowed to not believe what you're teaching. Can I go now? Oh, it's like they don't want to let you go. This is a dictatorship. This is what they were talking about in Brave New World in 1984. But instead of them telling you what you have to do, they prove what's true. And that's what they did in 2020, isn't it? you have to do this or you'll die or you'll put everybody in danger. Well, I'll tell you what, man. That thing they're telling everybody to take, I didn't take it. And I ran a sub 7 minute mile the other day. Can you run a sub 7 minute mile? That's not really that impressive, honestly, but yeah, I'm gonna be focusing on my mile time and my 5K, and we're just gonna keep going, baby. We're gonna get that down to like a 6:15. That's a really solid goal. I ran a 6:10 in high school when I was like 40 pounds lighter. So, and that's running it cold. I hadn't run the mile in 3 months. But anyway, I have the freedom to believe what I want to believe. Okay? I'm allowed to not believe in macroevolution. And, you know, Christians get mocked. And, hey, you know what? The thing is that evolution is backed by infinite money and the full weight of the establishment. So you guys have every advantage in the world. And, well, it seems to me like people like Charlie Kirk who go out and debate and have a discourse. Well, we're living in a time where they get assassinated in the public as like a message or a warning, like this is what happens when you try to stand against the establishment that's trying to shove atheism down your throat. And all you little atheists in my chat, well, I guess you'll just have to let me know the next time the government updates you on what you need to believe. Because that's not how it works for me. Like I said, my ancestor, he was the most successful rebel of all time. He told the government, it's like, hey, you know what? We're not going to answer to you guys anymore. And they're like, oh, I was like, hey, well, you know what? Boom, you're dead. That's what's in my DNA, bro. That's where I come from. I come from people who create their own fucking countries. If you got a problem with it, we'll put you in the fucking dirt. That's what I come from. That's just, there's nothing wrong with what I'm saying. That's just reality. That is what I come from. It's in my DNA not to bow down to tyranny. And I see the tyranny like, oh, we looked in outer space and your God's not real. Oh, we microwaved this bone and your God's not real. I don't buy it. And of course it's impressive. The documentary Hypothesis is impressive. B.F. Skinner is impressive. Macroevolution, the scientific model, which does have some evidence to support it, is impressive. But it's only a model. And as scientists are always talking about, well, it's not about proving things. Well, it's not proven. And that's the bottom line. You have an impressive scientific model, and I don't have to believe in it. And, you know what? I encourage everybody to go to the last video and read through our debates. But, you know, I just kind of feel like maybe watching Toy Story 3 again. Spooktober's coming up. I got other things to think about. I got other things to do. Maybe I'll respond to some of your comments. But I think I'm about ready to move on. I lean heavily toward macroevolution not being true. I lean heavily towards everything that they tell us about space being bullshit. I just flat out don't believe in the moon landing. I watched it. It looks fake. They're friends with Stanley Kubrick. Oh, perfect. Stanley Kubrick faked the fucking moon landing. Case closed. Next. Oh, well, we can't go back to space. Oh, wow. Well, that doesn't really look very good, does it? You lost the technology. I thought humanity was improving. I thought that there's no we, guys. There's them who tried to kill us in 2020, and then there's us who don't have infinite money from the establishment. We don't have $40 billion a year like NASA does. And what they're using that money for is the black budget, is the pool where they fake space footage, and the CGI. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. And then their big team of paid shills that shows up immediately when you take a stance against their establishment position. Gee, kind of like the video I just made on atheism, because they got money too, and they got shills too. I don't have to believe it, and I don't. And I know what evolution is. And I talked to Grok about it for hours last night, and I soul searched, and I was like, man, they apparently they do have some of these transitionary fossils. Because I'm not interested in the chichid fish. I'm not interested in the fruit flies. Well, maybe that's how fruit flies are. Maybe that's not how people are. I want to see it in humans. And I will keep doing my own research, and, I will be listening as the establishment updates on you on what you are to believe. But I've had my own experiences. I've been a vivid dreamer my entire life. I've had some interesting spiritual experiences that I've gone over through the course of my channel. I feel like I have gotten a taste of maybe some kind of, I don't want to say direct revelation from God, but I have seen beyond the veil a little bit. In this world and beyond it, I have experienced synchronicities. And that's fine. That's just for me and my personal experience. You can believe whatever you want. I'm going to believe whatever I want to believe. But I'll tell you what, Charlie Kirk went out there and was more than happy to discuss his beliefs with anyone. And if you're smarter than him, you could go make a fool out of him. And for the record, I looked up his debate this morning on evolution, and he doesn't even really go hard against it. He says, I just believe in creationism. That's just what I believe. I understand and I respect your research, but that's not what the Bible says. Charlie Kirk just didn't even really go that hard for it. I am not under the impression that every atheist who watches this video and the video before it are going to abandon their beliefs because of what I said. I believe that I have planted many seeds over the years, and I do believe that I've brought people to Christ. I do believe that I've made people believe in something, in some sort of divine intelligence. And something from the comment section, somebody's like, oh, it's a problem that the deist God makes it look like, the scientific model is accurate. That's not a problem for me. Doesn't matter. There could still be a God, even if it doesn't look like there's a God. Because this idea that, if it's not proven, then I'm not going to believe in it. Well, you believe in a theory that's not proven. Oh, but this is what there's the most overwhelming amount of evidence for. That's rhetoric. That is interpretations of data from people with an agenda. And at this point, I'm going around in circles. We're just under the hour mark, guys. Yeah. I don't believe in macroevolution. I don't believe in fucking outer space. And I think everything about space, here's what I'll end with. We'll go a little bit into the hour. You got these soy boys who it's for the last month I've just been doing everything about space, Betelgeuse and black holes and galaxies and stars and billions of miles away, and we're going to terraform Mars. Man, what an epic month. Now I'm going to spend a month about dinosaurs and the Cretaceous period. And, wow, did you know that Lucy was 4.5 million years old? We used to be apes. And you're living billions of miles away in a galaxy far away. Or you're living in, what's the Jurassic Park music? Dude, your mind is it's either 40 billion years ago or 10 million years ago or 20 billion miles away. And it's dude, you know where my mind is at? The French Revolution, the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, the schism between Orthodoxy and Catholicism and the Templars and the Crusades and pre-Christ. There's all kinds of I go back as far as Pythagoras, 500 BC, and Plato, and this idea that humanity keeps getting better. It's we went into a dark age because they lost the works of Aristotle and Plato, and they got Plato back first, and then they got Aristotle. But really, it looks like the Greeks made the most innovations for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years. So I'm with Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's a pessimist, and this idea that we're progressing, this is progress, that things keep getting better. No, man. The people who made the iPhone are smart, but they were standing on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of those giants believed in God. If you're doing percentages of how many scientists are Christian or religious, about half of scientists today are Christian. It's believed that atheism has a slight favor. But if you average that with the scientists of all time, they're overwhelmingly Christian. It's like, oh, well, we know better now because everything's better now. Really? Is it better? Is it better doom scrolling on Facebook and Instagram and oh, I'm going to sign up for Tinder Gold and pay some fucking asshole $40 a month so I can find a girlfriend. Rejected. Oh, I can't meet anybody. Is this really better, dude? Is this way of life better? Nah, man. Schopenhauer says that we live in just this kind of fucking ball of tragedy and that people are wicked and that people live in suffering because their will is suffering and it can only be temporarily quenched. And, a lot of what capitalism has done is given us what we think we want. It's like, oh, now it's easier to cook. Now it's easier to do this and get here quicker, call this person quicker, get these meetings done quicker, do things from home. You don't have to go to Blockbuster. You don't have to go anywhere. Everything comes to your door. And you're miserable. It's stupid. So, yeah, this idea that, oh, it's better because it's new, that's certainly not how music works. That's certainly not how movies work. I don't think this is how it works either. So yeah, this is not a refutation by any means, but again, this is some of my thoughts. And somebody accused me of being arrogant. They're like, you're being really arrogant and there's no use for it. People are telling you you're wrong and you're not listening. Yeah, and I'm telling you that you're wrong. Wow, so you said I'm wrong, and I said you're wrong. What an epic debate. It's not an argument to say that somebody's wrong, bro. You have to explain how I'm wrong. But I don't think that atheists have any ground to stand on when it comes to calling people arrogant. You guys need to be humbled. You have arrogantly called out all world religions and all spiritual beliefs through all existence because you watched a couple of TED Talks. And I'm not referring to everybody in my comments. I realize that some of you people appear to be scientists. I believe that's because my channel is heavily monitored by people who hate God. And that's what it all comes down to, guys. People who latch on to this atheist view, they really hate God, man. And the society, the establishment, putting so much time and money into trying to prop up the scientific model of macroevolution, it's because they hate God, bro. And yeah, there's people like, hey man, God can work with evolution. Well, that's not what the people who are studying it think, bro. They want your culture gone. They want your faith gone. Because let's be real, man, they're fucking killing us. Look at the demographics. A certain group of people were 30% of the world population. Now they're 8% of the world population. That's progress, right? Oh, it must be better because it's newer. I'll leave you with that. God bless. Peace out. Wait, one thing. The definition of biological species concept. The BSc biological species concept proposed by Ernest Marr in 1942 defines a species as a group of organisms capable of interbreeding to produce fertile offspring while being reproductively isolated from other such groups. Well, they ran into some issues on this with the interbreeding of the Homo erectus and the Neanderthal, because they want to claim that they're different species, but to this day there's still a percentage of Neanderthal DNA in humans. They're breaking their own rules, basically. They're trying to say that for something to be a different species, it can't interbreed with another species and create healthy, fertile offspring. Well, they want to say that the Neanderthal and the Homo erectus were different species, but it's clearly demonstrated that they created healthy, fertile offspring. Furthermore, according to their definition, there wouldn't really be able to be macroevolution, because as soon as something becomes a new species, it's not going to be able to breed with anything because it's the first of its kind. So there you go. I'm not going to really act like macroevolution destroyed. Like, it's interesting though. Like, they're going to have to work on that definition because once again, science, when they want something to be a certain way, they'll find a way around their own rules. And when they love somebody like Darwin, they'll throw a lot of his ideology in the trash because, this is a cultural Marxist society and we can't have the view that Darwin has on race, but we can have his view on everything else. God bless you guys. Peace.